Hey guys, this video is going to be about the sociological model of racism. The one that is oh so commonly simplified as being privilege plus power. It's really important to understand this model so that way when someone brings it up you can respond to what they're actually saying instead of arguing over semantics. I found this image on the Wikipedia page for racism. It's under the Evolutionary Theories about the Origins of Racism section, and it is shown with the caption, Sociological Model of Ethnic and Racial Conflict. In case you're wondering why I pulled something from the evolutionary theory section rather than the sociological section, it's because the picture seems to more adequately explain the situation than the sociological section. Also, despite me poisoning the well for the sociological section, and then lampshading the poisoning, I'll show it at the end of the video along with the evolutionary theory section. If I was to simplify what this picture is saying, I would start with the center. Prejudice increases discrimination, which in turn intensifies prejudice. I think if you understand this part, then the rest of the model comes pretty naturally. It's just saying that prejudiced beliefs about a group are likely to occur when the group is disadvantaged. For example, the group could be generally poor due to being denied access to jobs, and then when people notice that the group is poor and attempt to understand why, some assume that it is because the group is lazy, and people are less likely to hire people they believe are lazy, so it repeats. I'm sure some people are claiming that this is what is happening in the wage gap, and I disagree, but that's another topic in itself. At the left, it seems to be talking about ethnically based phobias. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. People like resources, and if they see other people getting resources that they could have, they tend to think irrationally. Now, the right seems a little more complicated, but it really isn't. It's basically just saying that segregation causes further differences between the groups, which leads to easier identification of the group, which makes discrimination easier. I'm sure you can pause and figure it out yourself if it doesn't make sense. An interesting thing to notice about this model is that you could theoretically replace ethnic group with just group, and all the conclusions would still be valid. This model seems to be a good way of describing any disadvantages that are due to prejudices and collectivist thinking. It is so good at it that we should be the first to reference it in discussions with these regressives. Another interesting thing is that power wasn't mentioned explicitly. Power is necessary for the model to function, but let's look at what power is needed. The power to discriminate is really the only one that is necessary. You could also say that the ones in power have more resources and are then more likely to have the perceived threat, but the perceived threat is both not necessary to the overall flow of the model, and it doesn't have to come from a fear of loss of resources. A pertinent example would be the fear of being discriminated against. Just listen to the black people who want to kill all white people, because they think all white people are just racist, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And to further explain how minorities in the West have the power to discriminate, I'd point to affirmative action. In a system where the voters believe that discriminating based on race is acceptable when it benefits minorities, you have a system which can implement racism against the majority group. Alright, here's the sociological section of the page that I promised to show. It says, racism is prejudiced beliefs that result in disadvantages for ethnic groups, and then it does the worst explanation of subconscious racism that I've ever heard. I actually believe in subconscious sociological racism to an extent, unlike seemingly most anti-progressives, so I'll attempt to explain how I view it. Racism causes certain traits that aren't necessarily racial, such as sagging pants, to be viewed as negative. Then, these traits are viewed as legitimate to discriminate on because they aren't explicitly racial or biological, and these traits should be viewed as legitimate to discriminate on, but the problem is that they aren't always examined to understand why they are using these for the basis of discrimination. I specifically chose sagging pants here because of the implicit racial connotation. SJWs will claim that anyone who discriminates based on them is because of racism. What they fail to realize is that there are legitimate reasons to discriminate on something like sagging pants, such as because showing underwear is gross. In other words, they believe in racism of the gaps. And here's the evolutionary theory section. It pretty much talks about how race tends to be used as a heuristic for determining which side someone is on. It also says that it could be a subset of viewing people with similar physical characteristics as more important due to kin selection. Yeah, that's all I got. There should be links to everything I talked about in the description below. Leave a comment if they're not, and have a nice day.